You know, I always thought a good marriage was built brick by brick, with small, thoughtful gestures. My wife, Chloe, used to say that. She said it was the way I always remembered the obscure poet she loved, or how I'd make her coffee just the way she liked it, with a dash of cream and no sugar. Those things used to make her smile. And let me tell you, her smile was like the sun breaking through on a cloudy day. I lived for it, I really did. But somewhere along the way, that sun began to set. At first, I thought it was just life happening. You know how it goes. The honeymoon phase fades, and the reality of life kicks in. Work stress, bills, and the slow grind of routine. It can take the magic out of a partnership. So, I doubled down on my efforts. I planned weekend getaways, surprise date nights, and even learned to bake scones because she once joked that I couldn't operate an oven to save my life. I thought I was doing all the right things. But Chloe, she started to recede. The warmth I loved so much, the spark in her eyes, it just wasn't there anymore. I'd lean in to kiss her, and she'd turn her head slightly, just enough for me to notice. I'd ask her how her day was, and she'd shrug, distracted, her thumb scrolling endlessly through her phone. I told myself it was just a phase. That's what you do, right? When you love someone, you don't give up when things get tough. You dig in your heels and fight for it. So, I fought. I fought with all I had. But no matter what I did, Chloe grew more distant. It wasn't just the big things, like how she'd stopped holding my hand when we walked together. It was the small things, too. Like how she started locking her phone, she'd never done that before. Or how she'd laugh at something she was reading, and when I asked her what it was, she'd say, "Oh, nothing. Nothing." That word started to feel like a fortress she was building between us. The worst part? She didn't even seem angry with me. If she'd been yelling or fighting, maybe I could have understood. But no, it was just this quiet, icy detachment, like she was slipping through my fingers and I couldn't hold on, no matter how hard I tried. Of course, I noticed. How could I not? But every time I brought it up, she brushed it off. "I'm just tired, Liam," she'd say. Or, "Work has been crazy." And like the idiot I was, I believed her. Or maybe I wanted to believe her, because the alternative, that she didn't love me anymore, was too painful to face. I remember one night, lying in bed next to her. She had her back to me, scrolling through her phone like always. I stared at the ceiling, wondering where we had gone wrong. I even blamed myself. Maybe I wasn't romantic enough or exciting enough. Maybe I'd gotten too comfortable. Marriage is supposed to be work, right? So, I worked harder. I didn't realize that I was working alone. My sister, Maya, noticed. She's always been blunt, sometimes to a fault. "Liam, something's off with Chloe," she said one evening over coffee. "You need to open your eyes." But I brushed her off. Maya had always been a little too suspicious of people, and I told myself she was just reading too much into things. Then there was Ben, my best friend since college. He's the kind of guy who doesn't say much but sees everything. "You okay, man? You've been looking drained lately," he asked me one day. I told him I was fine, but he didn't buy it. "Just don't ignore it if something feels wrong. That kind of thing doesn't fix itself." I should have listened to them. I should have paid attention to the warning signs. But I didn't. Instead, I kept telling myself that if I loved Chloe hard enough, it would fix everything. Looking back now, I realize how blind I was. I wanted to see her as the woman I fell in love with, the woman who used to light up every room she walked into. But the truth was staring me in the face, and I was too afraid to admit it. Chloe wasn't just drifting away. She was already gone. You know, it's funny how your gut knows things before your brain catches up. That nagging feeling in the back of your mind, the one you keep trying to ignore, that's your gut whispering the truth you don't want to hear. My gut had been whispering for months, but I kept silencing it. Asterisk Chloe wouldn't betray me. She wouldn't. Asterisk at least. That's what I told myself. The changes were subtle at first. She'd take her phone with her everywhere. Everywhere. To the kitchen, the bathroom, even to the laundry room. Chloe used to be so carefree with her phone, she'd leave it lying around without a second thought. But now, it was like it was tethered to her hand. And the lock screen, that was new too. I remember the first time I noticed her texting late at night. I'd gone to bed early, exhausted from a long day at work. But I woke up around midnight and saw the faint glow of her phone lighting up the room. She was lying on her side, her back to me, her fingers flying across the screen. "Chloe," I murmured, my voice groggy with sleep. "What are you doing?" She startled, like a kid caught sneaking candy before dinner. "Just texting Maya," she said quickly, turning the phone off and sliding it under her pillow. Maya. My sister. That didn't sit right. Maya hated texting. She barely even used her phone. But I didn't press the issue. I didn't want to seem paranoid. Instead, I rolled over and closed my eyes, ignoring the sinking feeling in my chest. Then there were the errands. Chloe had always been someone who loved her routines. Grocery shopping on Sundays, yoga on Thursdays, coffee with her friend Melissa on Fridays. But suddenly, she had all these unexpected appointments popping up. A run to the pharmacy, a last-minute meeting with a coworker, a quick stop at the mall. Every time she left, I'd find myself glancing at the clock. She'd say she'd be back in an hour, but it was always 2 or 3. And when I asked where she'd been, she'd give me vague answers. Oh, traffic was crazy, she'd say. Or, I ran into an old friend and lost track of time. I wanted to believe her. God, I wanted to believe her. But my gut was louder now, shouting what I didn't want to admit. I started noticing the little things, the way she'd suddenly laugh at something on her phone and then quickly turn it off when I walked into the room. Or how she'd get dressed up for these so-called errands, wearing perfume and lipstick even though she always told me she hated dressing up unless it was for a special occasion. And then there was Julian. I hadn't heard that name in years. Chloe had mentioned him once, years ago, when we were still dating. He was an old friend, she said, someone she'd grown up with. He's like a brother to me, she'd laughed. Don't be jealous. I hadn't been jealous back then. I trusted Chloe with every fiber of my being. She was mine, and I was hers. Julian was just a name, a ghost from her past. Or so I thought. Liam, Maya said one afternoon when she came over for coffee. I need to talk to you. Her tone was serious, and Maya wasn't one to beat around the bush. It's about Chloe. I stiffened. What about her? I heard her on the phone the other day, Maya said, her voice low. She was at the cafe with Melissa, and I was at the table next to them. She didn't see me, but I heard her say his name. Julian. She was laughing. Liam. Laughing like she used to laugh with you. My heart sank. Maya, that's ridiculous. She's probably just catching up with an old friend. Maya gave me a look. You really believe that? I didn't answer. I couldn't. Later that night, I found myself replaying Maya's words over and over in my head. Julian. The name started to feel like a splinter under my skin, irritating and impossible to ignore. Then Ben chimed in. He wasn't as direct as Maya, but his words hit just as hard. You've been looking tired, man, he said one evening after we went for drinks. Are you sure everything's okay at home? Yeah, I lied. Just work stress. Ben raised an eyebrow. Work stress, huh? Or something else? I wanted to tell him the truth, but I couldn't. I didn't even know what the truth was. All I knew was that something was wrong. Something was very, very wrong. But I wasn't ready to admit it yet. Not to Ben, not to Maya, and definitely not to myself. Denial is a funny thing. It wraps around you like a warm blanket, whispering that everything's fine when deep down, you know it isn't. That's where I was, clinging to the hope that Chloe was still the woman I fell in love with. But the cracks in our life were growing, and no amount of denial could keep them hidden. It started with her phone. For weeks, I couldn't shake the feeling that the answers to my suspicions were locked behind her passcode. Chloe never used to guard her phone. She'd leave it on the kitchen counter or the nightstand without a second thought. But now, it was always in her pocket or face down on the table. One night, while she was in the shower, I decided to take a look. I knew it wasn't right. I felt like a trespasser in my own marriage. But I needed answers. My hand shook as I picked up her phone, my heart pounding in my chest. Of course, it was locked. I tried her birthday, our wedding date, even the date we met. Nothing worked. It felt like a slap in the face. The woman who used to share everything with me now had secrets I wasn't allowed to touch. I didn't know what to do, so I reached out to Ben. Ben's always been the tech-savvy one. If anyone could help me crack this mystery, it was him. We met up at his place one weekend, and I poured out everything. Chloe's late-night texting, her vague errands, the name Julian. Ben listened quietly, his face serious. Let me see what I can do, he said. If she's deleting stuff, I might be able to recover it. A few days later, Ben called me. Liam, he said, you need to come over. Now. When I arrived, Ben had her recovered texts pulled up on his laptop. My stomach churned as I read the messages. Flirty, intimate, playful words that Chloe hadn't said to me in years. And the name at the top of every conversation? Julian. My world tilted. This wasn't just my imagination. This wasn't me being paranoid. Chloe was having an emotional affair, or worse, with a man I convinced myself didn't matter. "Liam," Ben said gently. "I'm sorry." I nodded, unable to speak. My chest felt tight, like I couldn't breathe. I wanted to scream, to punch something, but all I could do was stare at the screen, at the words she'd written to someone else. But it didn't end there. My curiosity, or maybe my masochism, drove me to dig deeper. I started paying closer attention to her behavior. I noticed the way her face lit up when she got a text, the way she always seemed to be in a rush when she left the house. Then, I found her location history. I didn't even know that was a feature until I stumbled upon it. It showed me everywhere she'd been in the past month. Grocery stores, her yoga class, Melissa's house. But one address kept popping up, a small apartment building on the other side of town. That's when it clicked. Julian wasn't just some distant figure from her past. He was here, in our city, in her life. And she was going to see him. I didn't confront her, not yet. I wasn't ready. Instead, I started driving past the apartment building, hoping to catch a glimpse of him. I don't know what I was looking for. Proof? Maybe. Closure? Or maybe I just wanted to see the man who had stolen my wife's attention. One day I saw him. He was stepping out of the building, tall and confident, with the kind of swagger that screamed trouble. He was everything I wasn't. Reckless, bold, dangerous. The kind of man who could make Chloe feel alive in a way I never could. My stomach churned as I watched him light a cigarette and lean against the wall, his phone in hand. Was he texting her? Was she laughing at his messages while I was at home trying to save a marriage she'd already abandoned? I drove away that day, my hands gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. My gut was no longer whispering. It was screaming. Chloe was cheating. She'd been lying to me for months, maybe longer. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed next to her, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing. I wanted to shake her awake, to demand answers, to scream, "How could you do this to me?" But I didn't. I couldn't. Instead, I waited. I knew the confrontation was coming, but I wasn't ready to face it yet. Not until I had all the pieces. Not until I knew exactly how far she'd gone. Anniversaries are supposed to be special, aren't they? A celebration of love, commitment, and the years you spent building a life together. That's what I wanted ours to be, a chance to reconnect, to remind Chloe of what we had. I'd planned everything, the perfect dinner, the music, the venue. I thought, this will be the night everything changes, but it did change, just not the way I'd hoped. Chloe seemed hesitant about the evening from the start. She didn't gush over her dress like she used to or twirl in front of the mirror asking me how she looked. Instead, she was quiet, distant, like her mind was somewhere else entirely. "Are you okay?" I asked as we drove to the venue, the soft hum of the radio filling the silence. She gave me a weak smile. "I'm fine, Liam. Just tired." Tired. That word again. It had become her go-to excuse for everything lately. But I didn't push. I wanted the night to go smoothly, so I swallowed my doubts and focused on the evening ahead. The ballroom was breathtaking, draped in golden lights and adorned with fresh roses. The live band played soft, romantic tunes that seemed to pull couples to the dance floor. I reached for Chloe's hand, hoping to lead her into a moment we'd remember forever. She hesitated for a fraction of a second before placing her hand in mine. Her touch felt cold, but I ignored it, guiding her onto the dance floor. As the music swelled, I wrapped my arms around her, holding her close. I could feel her tension, the way her body stiffened against mine. I tried to bridge the distance with words, whispering, "You look beautiful tonight." She didn't respond. Instead, she stared over my shoulder, her gaze far away. I tightened my hold on her, desperate to pull her back to me. And then it happened. She whispered his name, Julian. At first, I thought I'd misheard. Surely, she hadn't just said his name. His name. While we were dancing. I pulled back slightly, looking at her face. Her eyes widened, and a flicker of panic crossed her features before she quickly masked it. "What did you just say?" I asked, my voice low but trembling. "Nothing," she replied, too quickly. Her eyes darted away, and I knew. "You whispered his name while we danced," I said, the words feeling like shards of glass in my throat. She hesitated, then met my gaze with a defiance that chilled me to the core. Maybe because I wish I was dancing with him. Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. I stared at her, searching for some hint of remorse, of regret. But there was none. Her expression was hollow, her tone cold. I let go of her hand. The music continued to play, but it felt distant, like I was underwater. Around us, other couples danced, oblivious to the storm raging in my chest. I stepped back, my mind racing. "You're unbelievable," I muttered, my voice barely audible over the music. She didn't say anything. She just stood there, her arms hanging limply at her sides, like she didn't care, like I didn't matter. I turned and walked off the dance floor. My heart was pounding, my hands trembling with a mix of heartbreak and rage. I could feel eyes on me, whispers following in my wake. But I didn't care. All I could think about was him. Julian. The man who had stolen my wife's heart. The man she had just admitted she wanted more than me. I didn't even stop to think. My feet carried me out of the ballroom, down the steps, and into my car. I knew where to go. I'd seen his address and her location history enough times to commit it to memory. It was only a few blocks away, and every mile I drove felt like pouring gasoline on a fire inside me. When I pulled up outside his apartment, I sat in the car for a moment, gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. My mind was racing with questions, accusations, and anger. How long had this been going on? How many times had she lied to my face? Was I just some fool she kept around for convenience while she gave her heart to someone else? I got out of the car, slamming the door behind me, and headed for his building. I didn't care what I'd find or what I'd say. I just knew I needed answers. I needed to see the man who had taken what was mine. And God help him when I did. The air outside Julian's apartment building was cold and sharp, biting into my skin as I stood there staring at the door. It was a nondescript building, the kind you wouldn't look at twice if you passed it on the street. But to me, it was the epicenter of my rage, the place where Chloe's betrayal had come to life. My heart was pounding so hard it felt like it might burst out of my chest. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. What was I even planning to do? Confront him? Yell? Demand answers? None of it felt like enough. None of it would undo the months of lies, the stolen moments, the names she'd whispered while we danced. I climbed the steps two at a time, my fists clenched at my sides. My mind was racing with everything I wanted to say, every ounce of anger and hurt I'd been bottling up. I reached his door and hesitated for a fraction of a second before pounding on it with a force that rattled the frame. The door opened, and there he was. Julian. He looked exactly like I'd imagined. Confident, cocky, and infuriatingly nonchalant. He was taller than me, with broad shoulders and a smug grin that only fueled my rage. He was the kind of guy who didn't just walk into a room. He strutted, knowing all eyes would be on him. "Can I help you?" he asked, his voice dripping with arrogance. "You know damn well why I'm here," I snapped, stepping forward. He didn't move, didn't flinch, just stood there with that infuriating smirk on his face. "Ah," he said, realization dawning. "You must be Liam." He said my name like it was a joke, like I was a joke. Hearing him say my name made my blood boil. "You've been seeing my wife," I said, my voice trembling with anger. "You've been texting her, meeting her, lying to me." Julian crossed his arms, leaning casually against the doorframe. "Look, man, it's not what you think. Chloe and we're just friends. She needed someone to talk to, someone who understood her. That's all. Don't lie to me," I shouted, my voice echoing down the hallway. "I've seen the messages. I've seen the way she looks at her phone, the way she's been sneaking around. You think I'm stupid?" Julian's smirk faltered for a moment, replaced by something colder. "Look, if she's unhappy with you, that's not my fault. Maybe you should have done a better job keeping her interested." That was it. That was the moment I snapped. Before I even realized what I was doing, my fist connected with his face. The force of the punch sent him stumbling back, crashing into the wall behind him. He let out a grunt of pain, clutching his nose as blood started streaming down his face. "You son of a..." Julian lunged at me, but I was ready. I shoved him back, pinning him against the wall. "You think you can just waltz into my marriage and take what's mine?" I snarled, my voice shaking with fury. "You think you're better than me?" Julian struggled against my grip, his face twisted in pain and anger. "She came to me," he spat, blood dripping onto his shirt. "She's the one who reached out, not me." His words hit like a gut punch. As much as I wanted to blame him for everything, I couldn't ignore the truth. Chloe had made the choice. She'd let this happen. I released him, stepping back, my chest heaving. Julian slumped against the wall, wiping the blood from his face. "You've got issues, man," he muttered, glaring at me. I didn't respond. My fists were throbbing, my mind spinning. I'd come here for answers, but all I'd found was more pain. As I turned to leave, Julian called out. "For what it's worth, she doesn't love me, either. She's just lost." I didn't look back. His words echoed in my mind as I walked out of the building, my legs feeling like lead. The fight hadn't given me closure. It hadn't made me feel better. If anything, it had only confirmed what I already knew. Chloe was gone, and there was nothing I could do to bring her back. I got into my car and gripped the steering wheel, staring blankly at the dashboard. My hands were shaking, my knuckles bruised and bloodied. The weight of it all, the lies, the betrayal, the fight, came crashing down on me. I felt empty, like a part of me had been ripped away. I drove home in silence, the sound of the tires on the pavement the only thing keeping me grounded. When I walked into the house, Chloe was sitting on the couch, scrolling through her phone like nothing had happened. She looked up when she saw me, her expression unreadable. "Where have you been?" she asked casually, as if she didn't already know. I didn't answer. I just stared at her, my chest tight with all the things I wanted to say but couldn't. Finally, I turned and walked away, heading to the bedroom. I needed time to think, to figure out what to do next. Because one thing was clear, the woman I loved was no longer the woman sitting in my living room. And I didn't know if I could ever forgive her. I didn't sleep that night. My knuckles throbbed from the fight. My head pounded from all the unanswered questions, and my heart felt like it was shattered into a million pieces. Chloe hadn't even come to check on me. She stayed in the living room, scrolling through her phone as if nothing had happened, as if we hadn't just crossed the point of no return. The next morning, I woke up early, determined to confront her. I wasn't going to let this betrayal fester in silence anymore. If our marriage was over, I needed to hear it from her. I needed her to say the words out loud. When I walked into the kitchen, she was sitting at the table, sipping her coffee. She looked up when she saw me, her expression neutral. "Morning," she said, as if it was just another day. I didn't respond. I pulled out a chair and sat across from her, my eyes fixed on hers. "We need to talk," I said, my voice steady but firm. She sighed, setting her mug down. "About what?" "Don't play dumb, Chloe." "About Julian. About everything." She stiffened, her calm facade cracking for just a moment before she regained control. "I don't know what you're talking about. Stop lying to me." I snapped, slamming my fist on the table. The sound echoed through the kitchen, and Chloe flinched. "I went to his apartment last night. I talked to him. He told me everything." Her eyes widened, and for the first time, I saw fear. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. "Do you love him?" I demanded, my voice quieter now but no less intense. "Just tell me the truth, Chloe. Do you love him?" She hesitated, looking away. I don't know," she finally admitted. I let out a bitter laugh. "You don't know? After everything you've done, you don't know. It's complicated, Liam," she shot back, her voice rising. "You think this is easy for me? Do you think I wanted things to turn out this way?" "I don't know what you wanted," I said coldly, "because you never gave me a chance to fix things. You just ran to him." Her face twisted with anger. "Fix things? How could you fix something you didn't even know was broken? I've been unhappy for years, Liam. Years. And you never noticed." "That's not true," I said, shaking my head. "I noticed. I tried. But every time I asked you what was wrong, you shut me out. You lied to me." She stood up abruptly, pushing her chair back with a loud scrape. "Maybe because I knew you wouldn't understand. You never understood me, Liam. Not the way Julian does." The mention of his name was like a knife to the chest. I stood up, too, towering over her. "Julian doesn't love you, Chloe. He told me himself. You're just a fling to him, someone he can use when it's convenient." Her face paled, and for a moment, I thought she might cry. But instead, she glared at me, her eyes filled with defiance. "At least he made me feel alive. At least he made me feel something." Her words hit harder than any punch. I stared at her, my heart breaking all over again. "You know what?" I said, my voice trembling. I'm done. I'm done fighting for someone who doesn't want to be fought for." I turned to leave, but she grabbed my arm. "Liam, wait." I stopped, but didn't turn around. "What?" "I never meant for it to get this far," she said quietly. "I never meant to hurt you." I laughed bitterly. "You didn't mean to hurt me? Chloe, you destroyed me." I pulled my arm free and walked out of the house, slamming the door behind me. I needed air, space, anything to clear my head. I walked aimlessly through the neighborhood, my mind racing. I thought about the years we'd spent together, the promises we'd made, and the love we'd shared. How had it all come to this? By the time I returned home, Chloe was gone. Her car was missing, and the house was eerily quiet. I didn't know where she'd gone, and for the first time, I didn't care. I sat down on the couch, staring at the empty space where she'd been sitting the night before. My knuckles still throbbed from the fight with Julian, a reminder of the man who had come between us. But the truth was, Julian wasn't the real problem. The real problem was us. Me, Chloe, and the broken pieces of our marriage that neither of us had been willing to face. For the first time in months, I felt a strange sense of peace. It wasn't relief, exactly. It was more like acceptance. Chloe had made her choices, and now I had to make mine. I wasn't sure what the future held, but I knew one thing for certain. I couldn't keep living like this. It was time to let go. When Chloe left that day, I didn't chase her. I didn't call her or send a message asking where she went. For the first time in months, maybe years, I let her go. There was no fight left in me, no more desperate attempts to win her back or save a marriage that had already crumbled. The house felt unervingly quiet in her absence. Every corner of it seemed to echo with memories of what we once were, but those memories felt distant, like they belonged to someone else's life. I spent hours sitting on the couch, staring at nothing, replaying the events of the past few days in my mind. The fight with Julian, Chloe's cold admission, the lies, it was all too much. Maya showed up later that evening, unannounced as usual. She took one look at me, slouched on the couch with a drink in hand, and sighed. "What happened?" she asked, pulling up a chair. I gave her the rundown. Chloe's name slipped during the dance, the confrontation at Julian's apartment, and our fight that morning. By the time I finished, Maya looked like she was ready to march over to Julian's place and break his nose all over again. "I told you something was off," she said, her tone sharp. "I told you months ago." I nodded, not even trying to argue. "You were right. I didn't want to see it, but you were right." She softened, her eyes filled with pity. "Liam, you've been through hell. You don't deserve this." "No," I said, my voice heavy. "But it happened anyway." Maya stayed with me that night, refusing to leave me alone. She ordered takeout, forced me to eat, and made me promise to get some sleep. "You can't let this destroy you," she said as she headed to the guest room. "You're stronger than that." I wasn't so sure. The next morning, I woke up to find Ben sitting in the kitchen with Maya, a steaming cup of coffee in his hand. "She called me," he said when I walked in. "Chloe?" I asked, my chest tightening. "No, Maya," he said, gesturing toward my sister. "She thought you could use some backup." I sat down with them, grateful for their support even though I hated feeling like a charity case. We talked about everything. About the marriage, about Julian, about what came next. Ben, ever the practical one, suggested I file for divorce immediately. "There's no coming back from this, Liam," he said. "You know that, right?" I nodded. I did know. Chloe's betrayal had cut too deep, and the love we once shared felt irreparably damaged. Still, the thought of ending our marriage was painful. Divorce wasn't just a legal process. It was the final nail in the coffin of a life I'd spent years building. That afternoon, I packed a bag and left the house. I couldn't stay there, surrounded by reminders of Chloe. I checked into a nearby hotel, needing space to think and figure out my next steps. I called my boss and took the week off work, citing personal reasons. He didn't press for details, which I appreciated. The days that followed were a blur. Maya and Ben kept checking in, refusing to let me isolate myself completely. I spent hours walking around the city, my thoughts a chaotic mess. I found myself replaying the good times with Chloe, wondering where things had gone wrong. Was it my fault? Had I been too focused on work, too blind to her unhappiness? Or was this just who she was, a woman who couldn't be content with a simple, steady love? Chloe didn't contact me during those days, and I didn't reach out to her, either. It was like we'd silently agreed to let the silence speak for us. When I finally returned to the house, it felt different, emptier, colder. Chloe's belongings were still there, but her presence was gone. That evening, I sat down and wrote her a letter. It wasn't for her, really, it was for me. I poured out everything I'd been feeling. The hurt, the betrayal, the love that had once been so strong but had now withered away. Writing it felt like letting go, like releasing a weight I'd been carrying for too long. By the time I finished, I knew what I had to do. The next morning, I called a divorce lawyer. The conversation was brief but decisive. I didn't want to fight or drawn-out negotiations. I just wanted it to be over. A week later, Chloe finally called. Her voice was hesitant, almost fragile. "Can we talk?" she asked. "About what?" I replied, my tone colder than I intended. "About us." "There is no us, Chloe. Not anymore." She was silent for a moment before saying, I'm sorry, Liam. For everything. I wanted to believe her. Part of me even wanted to forgive her. But I couldn't. Not yet. Maybe not ever. I hope you find what you're looking for, I said before hanging up. I never thought I'd be the kind of man to sit across from a divorce lawyer, talking about splitting assets and untangling a life I thought was built to last forever. Yet there I was, in a sterile office that smelled faintly of old paper and stale coffee, listening to a man in a sharp suit ask me about property, finances, and irreconcilable differences. Do you want to contest anything? The lawyer asked, his tone professional but detached. Or are you willing to settle amicably? Amicably, I replied without hesitation. I didn't have the energy for a fight, and honestly, I didn't want anything from Chloe except freedom. The house, the car, the furniture, I didn't care. Let her have it all. None of it mattered anymore. The lawyer nodded, jotting down notes. I'll prepare the paperwork. Once it's filed, she'll have 30 days to respond. If she doesn't contest, it'll be finalized within a few months. Months. It felt like a lifetime, but at least there was an end in sight. When I left the lawyer's office, I sat in my car for a long time, staring at the dashboard. I thought about the day I proposed to Chloe, how her face had lit up when I slipped the ring on her finger. I thought about our wedding day, the vows we'd made, the promises we'd broken. And I thought about the man I'd been back then. Hopeful, idealistic, completely in love. That man was gone now. Chloe didn't make things easy, of course. A few days after the papers were served, she showed up at the house. I was packing some of my things when I heard the doorbell ring. When I opened the door, there she was, standing on the porch with tears in her eyes. Liam, she said softly, her voice trembling, can we talk? I hesitated for a moment before stepping aside to let her in. She walked into the living room, her eyes scanning the boxes and suitcases. You're leaving. I can't stay here, Chloe, I said, my tone even. Not after everything. She sat down on the couch, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. I made a mistake, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I didn't mean for things to go this far. A mistake, I repeated, incredulous. You had an affair, Chloe. You lied to me for months. That's not a mistake, that's a choice. She flinched at my words, but I didn't care. I wasn't going to sugarcoat the truth for her, not anymore. I never stopped loving you, she said, tears streaming down her face. I was confused, Liam. I was lost. I wanted to believe her. God, I wanted to believe her. But I couldn't forget the way she'd whispered Julian's name while we danced, the way she looked at me with nothing but cold detachment. You don't hurt the people you love, I said, my voice breaking. You don't betray them. She stood up, crossing the room to stand in front of me. I'm sorry, she said, reaching for my hand. I'll do whatever it takes to fix this. Please, Liam, don't give up on us. I pulled my hand away, taking a step back. I already did, I said quietly. The moment you chose him over me, I gave up. Her face crumpled, and she let out a choked sob. Liam, please. I can't, I said, my voice firm. It's over, Chloe. It has to be. She stayed for a few more minutes, begging me to reconsider, but my mind was made up. When she finally left, I felt an overwhelming sense of relief. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe again. The weeks that followed were a blur of paperwork and legal appointments. Chloe didn't contest the divorce, which made things simpler, but it didn't make them easier. Each signature, each notarized document, felt like closing a door I wasn't ready to walk away from. But I signed them all anyway, knowing it was the only way to move forward. Maya and Ben were my rocks during that time. Maya checked in daily, making sure I was eating and sleeping, while Ben dragged me out of the house whenever he could. You need to get out of your own head, he said one evening as we sat at a bar. This isn't the end, man. It's just the beginning of something new. I wanted to believe him, but it was hard. Every time I saw a happy couple walking down the street or holding hands in a restaurant, I felt a pang of bitterness. That used to be me and Chloe. We used to be those people. But as the days turned into weeks, the pain started to dull. It didn't disappear, it never really does, but it became more bearable. I started focusing on myself for the first time in years, picking up old hobbies, reconnecting with friends, and even going to therapy. Slowly but surely, I began to heal. The day the divorce was finalized, I felt a strange mix of emotions, sadness for what I'd lost, relief that it was finally over, and hope for what might come next. I walked out of the courthouse and stood on the steps for a moment, letting the sun warm my face. I wasn't sure what the future held, But for the first time in a long time, I felt like I had a future. And that was enough. The day the divorce was finalized felt like the end of one life and the beginning of another. For years, my identity had been wrapped up in being Chloe's husband, her partner, her confidant, the man who would do anything to make her happy. But that part of my life was over now, and I was left with one simple, terrifying question. Who am I without her? At first, it was disorienting. The routines we'd built together were gone. I didn't have to remember her favorite coffee order or plan surprise date nights. I didn't have to tiptoe around her mood swings or wonder if she was sneaking off to see Julian. For the first time in years, I was free. But freedom, I learned, can feel a lot like loneliness. Maya, of course, wasn't going to let me wallow in self-pity. She showed up at my new, smaller apartment the day after the divorce was finalized with a to-do list as long as her arm. "We're going to fix you," she said, dragging me off the couch. "Step 1. You're getting out of this house." I tried to protest, but she was relentless. She signed me up for a gym membership, introduced me to hiking trails, and even convinced me to join a book club. "You need a distraction," she said, waving off my complaints. "And who knows? You might actually enjoy yourself." Ben joined in on the mission, dragging me to trivia nights and happy hours. At first, I felt like a third wheel, watching everyone else laugh and joke while I nursed my drink in silence. But slowly, I started to come out of my shell. I even started winning a few rounds of trivia, which Ben was quick to remind me was a sign of progress. One night, Ben suggested I try something completely out of my comfort zone. "There's this support group," he said, sipping his beer, "for people going through divorces. You might find it helpful." "A support group?" I scoffed. "That's not really my thing, Ben." "Just give it a shot," he said. "What's the worst that could happen? You sit in a room, listen to other people complain about their exes, and realize you're not alone." I reluctantly agreed, mostly because Ben wouldn't let it go. The group met every Thursday at a local community center, and I showed up with low expectations. The room was small, with a circle of folding chairs and a pot of bad coffee in the corner. I almost turned around and left, but then I saw her. Sarah. She was sitting near the window, sipping her coffee and flipping through a notebook. There was something about her quiet confidence, the way she seemed perfectly at ease in a room full of strangers, that made me pause. When she looked up and caught my eye, she smiled, and for the first time in months, I felt a flicker of something I hadn't felt in a long time, curiosity. I took a seat across from her, and as the group began to share their stories, I found myself watching her more than I should have. She spoke with a calm honesty, sharing her experience with a husband who had left her for someone younger. Her voice was steady, but her words carried a weight that I recognized. She was hurting, just like I was. After the meeting, I found myself lingering by the door, hoping for a chance to talk to her. When she walked past, she paused and said, "First time. Is it that obvious?" I asked, managing a small smile. She laughed softly. "We've all been there. It gets easier." I wasn't sure if she meant the group or life in general, but I nodded anyway. "Thanks." Over the next few weeks, Sarah and I started talking more. At first, it was just polite conversation before and after the meetings, but eventually, we started meeting for coffee afterward. She was easy to talk to, and for the first time, I felt like someone truly understood what I was going through. Sarah wasn't just kind, she was strong. She'd been through her own heartbreak, but she hadn't let it define her. She had this way of looking at life that made me realize I didn't have to be stuck in my pain forever. She inspired me to move forward, to start rebuilding. One evening, after a particularly emotional meeting, we found ourselves sitting in a diner, talking long after the coffee had gone cold. "Do you ever think about what's next?" I asked her. "All the time," she said, stirring her sugar into her cup. "But I've stopped trying to plan it. Life doesn't really care about your plans, does it?" "No," I said, smiling. "It doesn't." We sat in silence for a moment, and then she said something I'll never forget. "The thing about heartbreak is that it doesn't mean you're broken. It just means you're human." Her words stayed with me long after that night. They became a kind of mantra, a reminder that what I'd been through didn't define me. It was just a chapter in my story, not the whole book. In the weeks that followed, I started to feel like myself again. Or maybe, someone new.